Welcome to today's webinar, Integrating M1 with Insteon for Lighting Control. My name is Jessie and I'm the Marketing Coordinator here at ELK. And before we get started, I just wanted to let you guys all know that we will be at CEDIA this year. It's September 25th through the 28th. So if you are going to be in Denver, Colorado this year for CEDIA, come by booth 1129. We will be giving away an M1 kit. So be sure to come by the booth, drop off your business card, or fill out one of our registration slips, because it's a big prize to win there. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, so make sure you like us, follow us, connect with us. You can check out all of our webinars and other videos on our YouTube site at Elk Products Videos. Our presenters today are Amy Strickland and Steve Lee. Steve Lee is currently not with us right now because of technical difficulties, but we will still move on with Amy Strickland. Amy is our tech support queen here at Elk. She also helps out with marketing, doing graphic design. So many of you might have already talked with her if you called into tech support. To find out more about Insteon training, you can always visit their website at smarthomepro.com. During the webinar, if you have questions, you can type your question in the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel on the right side of your screen. We will get to as many questions as we can during this webinar, but if we do not answer your question or we run out of time, we will answer after the webinar. We will be sending you guys a follow-up email with this webinar link and other information about Insteon and M1. And if you had a question that we didn't answer, we'll reply to you then. So with further ado, I know you guys are all excited about finally having this webinar. I'll pass it along to Amy.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Jessie. We're going to go ahead and dive right in here, and it looks like Steve has overcome whatever difficulty he was having. He's with us now, so glad to have Steve with us. Just going to give you a brief overview here of the M1. I feel like our audience is probably pretty familiar with the M1, but just to hit some of the highlights. Of course, the M1 is a cross-platform control, which means it does more than just security. We also incorporate fire and access control, lighting control, energy and task management, thermostat control, those kind of things into the M1. The benefit of doing that is to allow you to schedule those things, based on your security system status or sunrise, sunset, those types of things that are built into the M1. So that's the benefit that you get there. Of course, the M1 can be an IP accessible device for you. You can have that over the internet, and that allows you to have remote control of the system. It also has some email capability. We've got a variety of user interfaces, some of which you see on the screen here, different keypads, touch screens. There are apps for smartphones and tablets and PC software, that sort of thing. We'll touch some of those subjects in a little bit more detail as we go through this presentation. And of course, the M1 has a pretty large zone capacity where you can be up to 208 zones. Up to 144 of those zones can be wireless, and we do have our new two-way wireless technology incorporated into the M1 with the proper transceiver. So that's an exciting new product line that we've been launching at some of the recent trade shows. I'm sure if you've been to one of those shows, you've seen that. Going to turn it over to Steve now. Steve, are you with us?
Yeah, can I do a test on the audio here? I had problems with it chopping out, and then the thing shut down on me. So I'm going to just do a quick audio check, make sure everybody can hear me okay.
Okay, I'm hearing you good. If anyone in the audience is having problems with audio, please type something into the questions box so that we know that you're experiencing trouble. Otherwise, we will move forward.
Everyone's hearing him great.
Okay, do I have control of the screen, or are you going to go through the slides?
You do.
Okay. Okay, everybody. My name is Steve Lee. I'm the National Training Manager and Head of Business Development for Insteon. I've been an installer for many years and been with the company now as an employee about 7 years, going around and training and doing all of our product integration into various applications and some large new development projects that we're doing. So excited to have the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the relationship between Insteon and Elk, and how the two of them can both help each other out in your automation endeavors. So the first thing is, what is Insteon? Insteon is a two-way technology. Our products are both power line and radio frequency, so it's the only product of its kind that actually does both protocols. And both are sending and receiving both of those at the exact same time. All devices see these signals and do a repeat of the message. So it's not just send the message out and hope that it gets there and hope device is turned on. There's actually a verification process built into that. We have over 200 products that are in the product line. We're constantly adding to those. We've got millions of them that have been installed out in the field, and it is, I think, the most diverse product line in this arena out there. I'm having seem to be having an issue. Okay, there we go. Changing between screens. So a little bit about some of the bullet points of Insteon. Why would we say it's better? Well, as far as the reliability, the dual band technology that I spoke about allows devices where you might have a lot of concrete construction to be able to communicate over the power line. And when you need the flexibility to be able to communicate out to RF-only devices like thermostats and handheld remotes and that type of thing, now the devices, no matter where you are in the house, as long as you have an Insteon device anywhere close to it, you can control those devices. So it gives us the flexibility of having both of those protocols. It's very simple to install. There's no network enrollment process. You just wire them up like a standard switch or plug them into the wall, and you can link the products together through software or manually. It's scalable in the fact that it doesn't really matter how small you get or how large you get on the installs. We don't max out at a certain amount of devices. We've got a house in Aspen that we did that has over 800 devices. We've done some commercial projects that have an amount close to that. So you can go and start a system out with 3 or 4 devices, and you can expand into hundreds. So you don't have to worry about the project being too large, and the signal actually gets stronger the more devices that you put on. It starts off strong and it gets even better. There's no visible delays in the protocol. Our transmission packets are about a 40th of a second, so when we send a command, all devices see it and will repeat that message multiple times. And so you don't have to send out a kind of a macro of messages where one device goes on and then another and then another, and you see that popcorn effect that we used to call it. So with Insteon, you can literally send 1,000 devices a command and have them all go on instantly. Affordable, I think it's probably one of the most affordable technologies out there in this arena. Yeah, we have, like I mentioned, well over 100 devices, and they're all very cost effective. Fully compatible. One thing with Insteon is that we manufacture all the devices, and we have close partners that manufacture them and have to kind of adhere to those guidelines. So as opposed to just making products that are selling chips to companies that make products, and those companies make them in their own self-interest, well, our products are all designed to always work together. So you can take any one of our devices from whenever you bought it, put that device in link mode, and it'll always link to a device, even if it was purchased 5, 6 years later. We've won a lot of awards for our technologies and innovation, and we have more to come. So we're constantly looking at adding new devices and to the offering. Just bear with me right here. Okay, so
Just want to point out some of the reasons why you would want to integrate M1 and Insteon. You know, these things are pretty obvious, but just to point out, you know, we integrate the two, you're going to have that convenience, energy savings. You can enhance the safety and security of the system. As I'd mentioned before, we can schedule things or control things based on occupancy, the arm state of the system, using our sunrise-sunset calculations, time of day, that sort of thing. You know, as Steve was mentioning, it's you know the integration and you know the Insteon product is easy to install and work with, and also that flexibility and the ability to have the different you know, job sizes, small or large. Of course, with the RF and the power line carrier technology, you're looking at a great fit for you know, an existing construction, or works great for new construction as well.
So I'm still here. I'm just having an issue with what I'm seeing on my screen. Okay, here we go. One thing I wanted to add before we got started is there's a couple of the kind of go-to apps that support ELK through various integration. eKeypad is great just for direct support, and MobiLink is kind of the standard when using the ISY and the ELK integration, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So these are a couple of apps out there. Both of them will arm and disarm your system. We'll be able to allow you to monitor zone status, and they have various offerings. You can see with eKeypad there's a floor plan manager also, so you can actually place your keypad as a graphic on your floor plan and then just touch that graphic and it'll pop up and allow you to arm and disarm from a tablet or phone.
ELK offers a piece of software called M1 to Go, which is a free download. That's probably one of the key points about it that you're going to be excited about, is it's free. It's a PC-based software that does allow you to control the aspects of the M1 system and the things that are integrated into it, like the Insteon lighting. That's a really nice piece of software that you can offer your customer at no additional cost. One of the nice things about this software is that it's portable. You can install it on a USB flash drive, take it with you, that kind of thing. So you know, just another, again, you know, free feature that you can add to your installation.
Okay, so the two options that we have to do this with Insteon, with ELK and Insteon integration. The first one is what we originally had, and I had some experience with this in the early days, where we used the M1 XSP and the ELK M1 Gold. We connected it to the serial bus, and then we used our PowerLink modem and connected it to the serial port of the M1 XSP. Now, we're not going to go into any detail on this setup. It was a little bit clumsy as far as how you did the links. You weren't exposed to seeing all of them in a graphical format. You had to link them one at a time, and then you would go into your lighting list and you would add those device descriptions in order that you linked them. So what we're going to be talking about today, though, is using the M1 XSP and or M1 XEP, which is the Ethernet interface, and tying that in with the ISY. So if you're not familiar with the ISY, it's a little server controller that does exceptional conditional logic. It's an Insteon controller, and it has the ability to talk to multiple platforms. So we've done jobs where we've talked to all sorts of third-party components. And for us, one of the first ones, and the one that I've used the most, is this relationship that we're going to go over today, which is with the M1 Gold through the M1 XEP and having the ISY on the other end. So we're going to go over the setup of it. So in this case, you'll notice something different. Instead of it having a serial, the four-wire serial bus that it connects to, it's actually going to connect to the DB9 serial connector at the top right side of the ELK. And there's an Ethernet port also that you'll plug from there into your router. Now, the nice thing about this is, if you're familiar programming in ELK, you used to have to USB to serial cable that you would plug into that port, and then you'd put it on your laptop. Now, you'd have to have a long extender if you wanted to be able to actually sit down. So most of your programming was done this way, and it kept you tethered to the alarm panel. So now, by using the M1 XEP, It allows you to actually be anywhere in the room or really anywhere, and to be able to talk to your alarm system, enroll devices, and get things into the system without having to actually be wired by a cable to the M1 controller. Now, the other side of this equation is now we've got out of our router, we go into the input of the ISY. And the ISY, you'll see the blue cable goes in to the PowerLink modem. So what we have here now is a network connection. These devices are connected over the network. We don't have a physical 4-wire cable that connects them. We're doing it through a network protocol, which allows us not only to be remote with our laptop while we're programming this, but to allow us to install these components, in some cases in different rooms, where maybe it just isn't applicable to have them in the same room. All they need to do is be on the network. And in homes today, there's network wires are set up everywhere. It makes it easy to put this device then wherever you want. So this is the M1 Gold kit. Smart Home sells a kit that has the ISY, the M1 XEP, everything you see pictured here as a lighting control kit. So you can get started with one product that has it all bundled together and then expand on that. It has one keypad, it has a 2-way audio speaker, battery, power supply, all the necessary things you need to get started with lighting control using your alarm system for your conditionals. So now configuring the M1 XEP. When you first connect it, you remember I was telling you before that you used to have a USB cable to DB9 or serial cable that was plugged into your M1 Gold. Well, now you see we have this Ethernet interface that's plugged in. So if you're thinking, okay, well, I'm on my software and I've been doing stuff with my alarm system and I need to enroll this device. Well, now this product is taking the place of it and it's plugged in there. So your computer now no longer has a connection to it. So we're going to walk through the steps of how to get your computer back online with your alarm system using the M1 XEP. So you can see the connector there, DB9 to DB9 out on both products. We've got the Cat5 connection that goes into your router, and then your computer that's connected either through a patch cable or you wirelessly connect to it. And you're going to then start up at that point your RP software. Now, you want to get the M1 XEP enrolled into your alarm system. And since our software can't do it, we have to use the keypad for this function. Now, the keypad is already on the serial bus, and assuming that we've gone through and we installed everything ahead of time, when we're at this point, we've got our keypad working, these would be the steps that you would do on your alarm keypad. You'd hit the ELK button, then you would hit function 9, which is for installation and programming. The arrow over to the right, at that point it's going to block you and it's going to say, hey, you need to put in a valid PIN number. Now the default one is 172839, and if you look at a keypad, let's say on your phone, that would be top left, bottom left, and then it's middle top and bottom middle, and then right top and right bottom. That's how that number scheme comes about. So what's going to happen is that you'll go into a bus module enrollment when you hit the arrow key over one more time. Now, with your speaker hooked up, you'll actually hear this happen. What's going on during this process is your alarm system is now kind of rebooting itself, and it's re-looking at its data bus. And it says, hey, I see a new product. I see this Ethernet interface is now connected. Now it becomes a valid product that has a handshake to your M1 Gold, and it's going to allow me at that point to be able to start talking to it. So once we're now in the RP software and we want to find the M1 XEP, so you can't just go in and hit, okay, let me start talking to it. The software needs to know, well, what's the IP address and what's the port address of this device? So this is the process. It's going to show you how we come about that. So starting up the RP software, and this is free software that also comes with your ELK system. You want to create a new account for yourself. So You can do just the minimal stuff like what your name is and not fill out address and everything initially if you don't want to and you want to get started, or go out and fill all the details. If it's for a customer, you might want to put all the details that you can about them. You know, in some cases, maybe even their kids' names or whatever, if it's somebody you want to stay in touch with those customers and you want to remember their names. There's a spot for notes where you can type that type of information in. You also want to look at the serial number on the M1 Gold. At the bottom of it, you'll see a screenshot there. There's a serial number, and everyone has a different one. That's what's going to create a unique identifier to this RP access code in that M1 Gold. So now it's not just enough to know a username and a password to get in. You actually have to have the serial number on that system, which would require somebody to be in front of it and not just be remotely trying to get into it. So it adds another layer of security. And after you've got that information, you want to click on the M1 XCP setup. Now what it's going to do, it's going to go out over the network and it's going to look and say, okay, where's that M1 XCP that you installed? Now you can see from this screenshot that there's a finder tool that will actually pop up when you hit find, and it goes out and it starts scanning the network, and it popped up and it showed me, oh, here it is. It's at this MAC address, here's the IP address, here's the port address. Now, there's a simple tool. By just hitting use selected, it'll take all that information, it'll import it into that previous screen that we were on. So you don't have to go back and actually type it in, even though you could. In this case, you can just click on it and it'll take care of all that for you. Then you could go ahead and close that screen down. Now we want to go, and now that we've got it set up, we want to go in using our RP software, and we want to connect. So if you go under connections and go now to network, previously you would have gone to connect using a COM port when you were using your USB to serial cable. Now you can actually connect by way of network. You can be sitting on your laptop, sitting on the other side of the house, not even looking at the alarm panel now, and you can now be talking to it and communicating with it. So once you do that, it's going to go through, it's going to start authenticating, it's going to be checking the password and the default information and logging you into the system. Now, once you've done that, if you go in to the M1 XCP setup button on the account details screen, you want to make sure there's a button or a tab that says Enable Non-Secured Port. You're going to want to make sure that that box is checked. By default, it's going to be port 2101. You can actually change it, but that default port is perfectly fine. That's going to be the port that the ISY is going to talk to the alarm system on, so you're going to want to make sure that's enabled. Also, setting up a static IP. Initially, when it went out, it's going to find an IP address for your M1 XCP, and it will be assigned under DHCP, which would be that top right above under box B. You're going to want to click on Use Static IP, and you can input the scheme below here. 255.255.255.0 is kind of a standard subnet mask, and you can input that. Just take notes of it. You can input that in most every case. The default gateway, if you look up above on the IP address, it says 192.168.100.192. So the 192 is for my M1 XCP. The default gateway they're looking for is what's the gateway of your router, and typically it's going to be 1 unless it's been customized and changed. And then you want to send that information now to your M1 XCP. That way it'll update it, and now it's going to have a new static IP. The reason for this is it prevents then your router, if it got reset, from assigning a new IP address to your M1 XCP, and then the ISY trying to communicate with it says, well, wait a minute, I don't see it anymore. So you want to give it a static address so everybody, no matter what happens, if it reboots, everybody can still talk to each other. All the devices can still talk to each other. Now, here's the setup for the ISY portion of it. So you want to connect the ISY to the PLM, and the network router, you're going to plug in a Cat5 from the ISY into that. Now, there's a few different ways that you can access the ISY. One of them is through their website. You can go to universal-devices.com, and under support, you can click on a tab. It's a round button that says ISY, and what it'll do is their software will actually go out and look and see if it can find it on your system, and then it'll hook you up with it. The most common way is to do something like this, where you go into your network neighborhood and click on it. It'll show up as My Lighting, and then you can just click on that tab, and that tab will get you into the system. So double-clicking on My Lighting will launch it the same way. And in their forum, there's some other tricks. You can actually, in a lot of cases, based on the type of computer you have, you can type in ISY/admin just in your search engine or your URL bar on a browser, and a lot of times that will work also. In this case, I didn't put that in here because in some cases it doesn't work, and I don't want to make that sort of definitive. But if you allow UP&P devices to be seen on your network, and you can see a screenshot here of what my network looks like and all the devices that are connected, it'll show up as My Lighting, unless you change the name of it. So just a couple of ways to be able to connect to the device. So once you double-click on that, it's going to then pop up and say, okay, well, what's your username and password? Now, the default for the ISY is admin, and it's all lowercase. And that will get you in to the admin console. Now, the ISY does have, when you first log in, before they'll actually ask you for 2 passwords, there's kind of a default page that will allow you to control devices there also. And you can do it from your phone or any other device. It's kind of crude, but it will allow you to do that by logging into that same address. There's a tab, though, that says Admin Console. When you click on that, that's going to allow you to have access and exposure to the page we're looking at here. Now, what I'm showing you here is an ISY that's been populated with a bunch of devices already. And I just want to give you a couple ideas about how to add devices. You can refer to their instructions at the link above, but it's pretty straightforward. So there's going to be a tab that will allow you to, under link management, to add devices. So in the ISY, when I'm in this admin page, if I go to link devices and then click start linking, a box will pop up. Now you'll see the box says linking in progress, and it gives me 3 options. The default is remove existing links. I'm just going to tell you really quick what that means. It means that the ISY is going to learn in your new device, your Insteon device, and it's going to clear all those existing links out of it. Look at it as a completely new install. Now, if you choose, you can choose the second box, which says, hey, add the found device, but remove existing links that are beyond that, which says, okay, I want to add that device, and I want to keep the links in it, but anything else that it's linked to, I want to remove those links. The third thing says, yeah, add the device and keep all existing links. Now, you literally could have one keypad in a house that has a button that's maybe all off, and it's linked to everything. Well, with the ISY, if you chose that option and learned in just that keypad, it would actually go out and read the database of all of those devices that it finds in that keypad, and it will start populating them in the ISY. Now, that may seem like that's the way to go, but you're going to have a bunch of device IDs that will pop up that aren't going to have name descriptions. So you might find it to be better just do them one at a time. As you learn it in, rename it. So this is what we want to do at this point. You'd go through and build out the house, get all your devices in your ISY, and that's going to take us then to some of the other steps that we've got moving forward here. Now,
Steve,
yes.
I think that it would be a good time right now to just talk about, the difference between a load device and groups, and just hit that, and then we can check with Jesse and see if there's any questions before we get into the next step.
Okay. So within the protocol of Insteon, we've got the ability to do individual devices. Let's say a dimmer switch. And if I learn that into the ISY, that switch, I have control over it. I can bright and dim it, do various things. The ELK is going to have the ability to leverage those capabilities as well. We have relay switches that will just turn on and off, and those type of load controllers. So those are our individual type of load controllers. A scene would be an entity that we could call maybe welcome home. So it's not really a device, but it's a group of devices that are going to perform a task. And I would create a scene called welcome home, and in the ISY I would add, let's say, 5 or 6 devices into that scene. And I can change the levels of them. I can say I want that device to go to 75%, and this one 50, and this one 20, and create those different levels. And then the ELK could trigger, instead of just an event, instead of saying, well, at 5 o'clock if my front door opens and I've disarmed my system, I want these 5 lights to go on, instead of saying foyer light, hallway light, living room light, kitchen light, go on one at a time, I could create a scene called welcome home and have them all go on instantly. So that's the difference between an individual device that we would learn into the ISY, or once we've learned it in, we can actually create a scene. And the scene can be triggered just like it's one device, except multiple devices will respond. Okay, so the screenshot that you're looking at here, under configuration, there'll be an ELK area. And this is where you're going to take the information that we found about that M1XEP when we hit find M1XEP, and it gave us an IP address. You're going to type in the ELK's IP address for the M1XEP in this box. Now you'll notice port 2101. This was the box that was marked unsecured port. That one, you're going to, when you check it, it's going to allow this ISY now to communicate through that port. 2601 is the secured port that's used for other communication protocol onto alarm companies and for monitoring, and this is then a peripheral that can communicate on that port. Access code 3456 is the default, and this is really all the information that you need to put into the ISY to have it be able to start communicating. Once you hit save, and it'll go out, and once it establishes a connection, you're going to see in box C up here, you're going to see an area where it'll allow you to arm and disarm. That will all of a sudden appear, and it's going to let you know that you're actually on, you're connected to your ELK, and then you're able to move forward.
Steve, I have some questions that I would like to get answered.
Okay.
I have about 3 or 4. How is Insteon different from Z-Wave?
Okay, so with Z-Wave, they handle their packets by doing routed traffic, where it finds the best way to get the message from point to point. It's only RF and only radio frequency. Their products are built by multiple manufacturers, and Z-Wave as a company, which was Zensus originally, sells just chips, and in hopes that companies will make products that work with those chips. One of the challenges sometimes is when you buy products from 10 different manufacturers to put a system together, is then finding the right controller that can make all of those products talk seamlessly, because they're all built by different manufacturers and not necessarily built to work with each other. Even doesn't mean they won't work with each other, it just means that's not their sole purpose. That makes it a little more challenging. And like you said, it's strictly RF, so in heavily built homes that have a lot of concrete and block walls and that sort of thing, you find a lot of challenges getting the signal to go long distances. Typically wouldn't find a 20,000 square foot house or something that has Z-Wave in it on any large scale. It's great for kind of a room-to-room thing, but the sort of large-scale aspect of it, when you're dealing with only RF, can be challenging. With Insteon, we not only it's not only our technology and have chips, but we build all the products. We do have some companies that are on our kind of preferred list that we also allow to build products, but build them under those kind of strict guidelines that they have to follow all the same procedures as far as linking and unlinking and scene mode and all of that all of our other products do. And they're all tested before they're released into the market. They're both power line and RF, so it communicates both protocols, and it's a multiple repeat message. So when the message goes out, it doesn't just go out and hope that it got there. It goes out, and all devices that hear that repeat it for the benefit of something that maybe didn't hear the initial broadcast. Then they're repeated again and then again the controlling device will listen and make sure anything that it was controlled or linked to that was supposed to turn on actually did turn on. If they don't, it will target each device with 5 retries to each device. So you potentially have, close to 10 commands that are going out in a fraction of a second to make sure a device turned on. It's not just send it out and hope it got there. Our power line signal can go about a mile on the power line, and our RF signal can go 50 to 150 feet based on the type of construction material it's going through. But if I had RF only technology and I had one device in the house and I wanted to control the barn 50 yards up the hill, well, that's probably not going to happen. And with Insteon, that's just a normal project for us. So those are some some of the differences between the two.
Okay. Well, we can move on. Some other questions can be answered at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Now within the ISY, it was right next to that save button when we put in the IP address and the port address of the M1 XEP. There's a button called Export. Now what that's going to do, it's going to create an XML file, which is basically like an Excel spreadsheet that has device IDs, device names, the device, any DevCat, development category about it, so it knows kind of if is it a relay switch or a dimmer switch, that type of information. That's all put in this little spreadsheet. And the ISY will create it. And it's creating it in a format that the ELK is ready to receive. So it's very native to the ELK for this form to be pulling that in to its interface. And we'll go through the steps on how that's done. So you're going to create this file, and it's going to be listed as an ELK export file. And it's going to save it wherever you want by default. Puts it under a My Lighting file. And you can, if you want to put it on your desktop so it's easy to find, or wherever you want, this is the point where you'll make that change. But it's kind of a raw Excel or XML format, or Excel if you're used to Excel spreadsheets, kind of a raw format of the structure of all the information about the devices. And these are everything that you've learned in the ISY. It's now going to get pushed over into the ELK. Now, the cool thing about this is it's going to prevent you from having to type in all of these IDs and put in individual identifiers and everything that goes along with that. It's going to make this just really slick and seamless. So now we're back at a screenshot of our RP software. So you can see account details. That's the screen that you were in. Now, if you move your way down, there's a tab called Automation. And when you click on that, it's going to expand out, and it's got tasks and lighting and output and sunrise table and voice and these various categories that are under automation. If you go to lighting and you right-click on it, it's going to bring up an option to import lighting data. Now, what it's going to ask for is when you do this, it's going to say, okay, we want to import the lighting data, but what is that? Well, that's the file that you just created in your ELK system. And if you look at the different tabs here, you can see on tab C, there's different formats. Now, by default, it should pop up to Universal Devices ISY export for Insteon. And you see over where the other spot is, it says Browse. If you click there, you can go and find that project file that you just saved. So in this case, it was under My Lighting. If you saved it on your desktop, it would be desktop/export, wherever you have it. Also, there are some different tabs that are going to be set here, normally by default. One of them is to clear all the existing names, formats, and types. If you're doing and importing a lighting file, you're going to want to go and make sure that it clears out what was there originally so you don't have any overlap. Also, you want to set enable for the show flag. What that's going to do is it's going to allow them to show. So if you have a touchscreen or the portable ELK software that we spoke about earlier, you want to be able to see them on there. So that's what that means. If you don't want them to show, you would uncheck the box, and you'd have to do them manually for the devices, because you might have things where I don't really want to see them on my tablet, but I do want the ELK to be able to turn those things on and off. That's the only time I'm ever doing it, and so I don't want to have to sort through those devices when I'm looking at them on another, sort of peripheral like a phone or a tablet. So that's what the difference between those are. Clear all the voice descriptions, and also to enable the optional flag, which says that it's going to talk to another thing other than the ELK communicating through its own serial port. It's going to talk to another peripheral, and that one in this case would be the ISY. Now, once you do the import of that and you click OK, it's going to now pull up, and you're going to see on the screen here where it's all in yellow, it's going to pull up and have all these different device descriptions. Now, you do have an option in here if you want to rename some. You may find that some of them, because there's a limited amount of characters that you can put here, and you typed it in the ISY with a full name, breakfast chandelier. And now you look and say, well, cut off some of it. Well, you could abbreviate breakfast if you want, and spell out chandelier, or find some other ways, but it gives you an option to edit it at this point. Also, you can go through and even though you selected to show for all of them, you might find some that you're never going to want to turn off, and use this another spot here how to do that. Just uncheck the box. So instead of checking the ones that you want, if you chose to not show any of them, if you did the reverse of it and said, yeah, check everything, there's only one thing you don't want to show on your iPad, then you just uncheck the box. Then you want to send to controller. So what it's doing now, it's sending it all to the M1 Gold. Now you can make sure that you've got some synergy here between the alarm system and the lighting control, because now that you've pulled all these devices in and you've got them all working in your ISY, you verified that, but you want to make sure your alarm system is also talking to it. So here's a couple of quick ways that you can go through and do that. Go into your ELK system, and when you hit the ELK button, it's going to say view and control automation tasks. If you arrow over to the right once, now you're under tasks. You go up and you're in lighting. If you go over to the right, it's going to give you the first thing that was listed on that list of devices that we imported. And at that point, you could navigate. If you went up or down, you can navigate through the different ones. But let's say for purposes of this, we leave it there. And we want to turn on and off, and we can do that simply through just pushing the pound sign. And it even tells you, it says that you want to press pound to change. And so if the light's off, you hit it, it'll turn it on. So it's a good way to test. You want to make sure everything's communicating. Simple process. You can navigate through all your devices, though, and you're not limited to having to do it with just that one device.
I just wanted to point out on that previous screen that if it were a dimmable device, you see here where it has after the press pound to change, there's a little right arrow. Pressing the right arrow on the keypad would then give you some dim controls on devices that were defined as dimmers.
Yeah, I believe you can actually type in amounts too. Okay, this is the same area where we're under automation. If you're going to be writing rules and a rule is a program that says, hey, if it's sunset, I want my lights to turn on, maybe my welcome home scene or my outdoor lighting. Well, you want to make sure that you have the proper area that you're in to know what sunrise and sunset is. If you've got Los Angeles, California set in your ELK, and you live in Hickory, North Carolina, then you're going to have some differences of a few hours between what our sunset is and what it is on the East Coast. So you can go in under Select City, and you can see here the button or the box on the right. You can pull that information in, and then you want to calculate. So it recalculates that information. Now you've got an accurate longitude and latitude for wherever you live.
Before we get into the rules examples here, would like to check with Jesse and see if there's any questions that we can answer before we dive into rules.
does Insteon wireless frequencies and wireless routers ever interfere with one another?
Well, we've gone through great painstaking research early on to make sure that products that are being built now, a lot of them are on 2.4 gig and 5, that we're not conflicting with that. Even our power line communication with different types of network over the power line products, we've tested to make sure that there isn't a problem there. We've picked our frequencies appropriately for the products that are out there. So we're at 130 kilohertz on the power line to send our communication protocol, and those other sort of protocols are on a higher bandwidth or a lower bandwidth than us. As far as our RF, we're at 915. So the only time that we would see any sort of issue is if we had a lot of really old cordless phones, and I'm talking 15 years old maybe, where 900 megahertz was where there was a lot of that type of product. But it's been something that with our selected frequency and our power line frequency, having those together, that even with some RF interference in an area because somebody had an old cordless phone, it doesn't hinder the power line communication from working. And we've tested all those sort of power over Ethernet, different types of interfaces, and we've had no conflicts.
Okay. And what are some use cases for using the M1 to control scenes via the ISY as opposed to using programs to control scenes via the ISY?
Okay, great question. The ISY does have a module that you can purchase that does the reverse of this, where in the ISY you can say, yeah, I want to buy this module off their website, and it will go out and it'll pull your ELK alarm zones into the ISY, and it will allow you to write the rules there. So for purposes of what we're doing here, we're saying, well, I want all of my lighting control to be in my alarm system, and here's why. I want to write a conditional that says, hey, when my front door opens, and I'm basing it on my alarm contact. Insteon does have devices that you can put on your door to trigger that the door is open, but you've already got these alarm contacts. And this is something I used to say to customers, because I was in the business for many years as an installer. I would say, your alarm system, a lot of times you don't get the full benefit out of an alarm system, really, unfortunately, unless you're broken into. That's when it kicks in and comes into play. So why not have it be part of your daily routine? So things like motion detectors that are in your alarm system already, why not have them be occupancy sensors when they're not being alarm sensors? And a front door contact on your alarm, when I open up the door and my system sees that it's after sunset and I'm going to go in and disarm my system, why not have my foyer lights come on for me automatically, and have all I have to do is write that rule in my alarm system to say if it's after sunset and my front door opens, I want my foyer lights to come on. Or trigger an event. If the front door opens, it's after a certain time, and I've disarmed my system, based on my code, it knows who I am, I want a series of events to happen that might not happen for somebody else. So you can kind of get an idea of the creativity that you can get when you're using an alarm system now as an automation controller. I mean, truly an automation controller, to be able to leverage all of that work that was put in by the installer to put in all these door contacts. It might make you think and say, you know what, I think I'm going to stick an alarm contact on the pantry. Might even stick one on the wine cellar. And now somebody opens that up, and it's not necessarily something you don't really put an alarm on, but now it can be used for triggers or other conditional logic things. So hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you so much. We'll answer more questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Okay.
So what we want to do now is take you through just a couple of rules examples here. We're basically just going to go through some different examples that we think you might find helpful, and kind of get your gears turning a little bit. So we're going to start out with a really basic example. this example, we're going to actually be using a scene or a group, and we just want to turn all the lights off when the system is armed to away mode. So pretty basic rule, and just going to show you a few screenshots here to kind of show you where we're doing that in the rule screen. So under whenever, we're going to security alarms and choosing is armed, and then you can choose the different arm modes. This is where we would select armed away. Then we can go under the then and choose control lighting. While we're wanting to control a scene or a group of lights, we're actually going to select individual here. And that has a lot to do with the way that the M1 maps the various lights and groups in the lighting screen that we were looking at a few slides ago. So the M1 is capable of controlling up to 192 individual devices, load devices, and those are going to be mapped to addresses 1 through 192. Then starting at address 193 and going through to 256, you're going to have 64 possible groups or scenes there. So you can see what we've done here is just set up a group or a scene that's an all on or an all off. And that's going to be our first group. That's 193. And we're just selecting that particular address, and that we're going to choose to turn that off, and that will turn all the lights off. The next example we're going to show you is related to sunrise and sunset, and specifically sunset. We're going to go through and turn a few lights on. So we're actually specifying that we want this to happen a certain amount of time after sunset. You could have that happen right at sunset. You're going to find that option under the time occurrence selection under the whenever, and then you can choose a certain amount before or after. And you can see in this example we're actually choosing it to control a couple of individual lights. This could also be a group or a scene if we wanted it to. Again, just showing you an example here where if you don't necessarily have a group or a scene or didn't see the need to set one up for this particular example, you're only going to do this in this particular instance, that you can actually stack your then statements and control multiple lights that way. Again, if it's going to be a large group, then using a group or a scene would be good. We're just doing a couple here. Maybe we didn't necessarily want to set this up as a scene, so we've just done some individual light control there. And you can see we're also using some of the levels for our dimmable devices, and we can set those to different levels. Now, part of the M1's ability to calculate the sunrise and sunset also lets it know when it's dark outside. So we can actually incorporate that as an AND statement. An AND is a conditional statement that must be true at the time the whenever occurs. So there is something to the order of things. Your whenever and your AND aren't always interchangeable. In most cases they're not. Your whenever is what's actually going to trigger the rule, which in this case is an outdoor motion detector. We're seeing that it's dark outside and we want to turn a light on. So again, that dark outside option is under the AND statement. Now, one thing that you may run into in an AND statement, you can say, after sunset or before sunrise, but you can't really put those two statements in the same rule because the M1 calculates that from midnight to midnight, and it can't be after sunset and before sunrise at the same time during that period of time. So that's what this dark outside will overcome for you, having to split that up into two separate rules. You just do it with one rule instead. Now here's an example, and as Steve was stating, you may think as you're getting the alarm system put in, it may be a good idea to think about some different places that you might want to put sensors in that aren't necessarily strictly security or may not actually be alarm type zones. A closet door is a good example of that. So we can see here we have a master bedroom closet zone, and we want to turn the closet light on for 10 minutes when that door opens. So we just have that sensor. Whenever it becomes not secure, then we're going to issue a command to the closet light to turn on for 10 minutes. Now that's a really good example if you're prone to leaving the closet door open. You don't want the light to stay on infinitely there. You know, doing some energy management here and just added convenience, the timer will go ahead and turn the light off after a certain amount of time. But if you're the kind of person who actually remembers to close your closet door, which I am not, but if you happen to be good at that sort of thing, then you may want the light to go ahead and turn off. And so a second part of this, and again it would be a second rule added into this group of rules, would be to actually issue an off command when the zone becomes secure. So we say when the zone is secure, the door's been closed, we want to then issue an off command. And you can see on the screen how you could do that. Now here is, we're going to show an example. This is going to take 3 rules to go through this, but basically we want to turn a light off when the room is no longer occupied. And so here's an example of using one of those you know, alarm sensors, a motion detector in a master bedroom, to also kind of act as an occupancy sensor. We're going to use a counter in this case, and counters, there's a screen under automation where you can name them. That's basically all you're going to be doing there, is providing a name for the counter. And so you're going to need to set that up prior to writing these rules, but the counter is something that we can set to a particular value, we can add and subtract from it, and then we can trigger off of different values of that counter. And so we're going to step through this example. So if you go to you know, your zone input change and select the master bedroom zone, we can say when that becomes not secure, then we want to set a counter to a particular value. In this case we're setting it to 10, and that's going to end up becoming a 10-minute timer with the addition of the second rule. So under then you can go to set change counter and choose to set that counter to a particular value. In this case we would set it to 10. That's going to be our first rule, and then we're going to have a second rule in this example that's going to basically set that counter up as a minute timer. So every 60 seconds we're going to subtract 1 from the counter. So under time occurrence you have an every X seconds option. You can key in 60 there, and then under then we go back to set change counter, but this time we're going to subtract a value of 1 from that counter. And the last part of that is going to be to trigger when that counter reaches 0. So under whenever we have counter changes expires, we can say when that equals 0, then we want to issue a command to turn the master bedroom light off. And we can do that through the lighting screen. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the counters, you can trigger off of different levels of the counter, which in this case isn't very helpful, but that's just something to keep in mind, a good little trick in rules for you there. So with this example, as we're going through again, each time that motion detector trips, it's going to bump that counter back up to 10. So it would have to have been a full 10-minute period before the light's going to turn off. So it's not just going to turn off 10 minutes later, which we could do with one rule. This is allowing us to keep bumping that counter back up to 10. And so you would have to have no motion for 10 minutes before the light would turn off in this case. Now I'm happy to go through some other rules examples if you have something that you want to see, and it's something that we can do in a reasonable amount of time. We'll certainly do that for you. I can hop into ElkRP and show you some other rules. We'd like to go ahead at this point and just take some questions. I'm sure we have some.
Amy, I do have a couple of questions. If you have an Elk Insteon integration in place and you add Insteon components, in order to update the Elk, do you need to redo the complete export and import of all of the lighting data, or can you merely edit the lighting table of the M1 Gold with the appropriate additions?
You could manually edit the lighting screen in ElkRP if you've just added one device instead of having to go through the whole process of importing again. If you know what that device number is in your Insteon setup, then you could just go in and name that. You would need to set the format as serial expander, choose the correct type, make sure that you have that opt bit check and the show bit if you want to show it on the user interface. Alternately, you could go ahead and create another export file if there's several devices has been added and you don't want to have to go through the process of typing and all that, then you could do a re-import of that as well.
Okay. If a device needs to be replaced, can the replacement device be assigned the same ELK designation as the one that failed?
And I'm going to divert that one to Steve. Can you kind of go through with us if you have to replace a device, what just a basic rundown of what the steps would be and how that would affect the setup?
So assuming that we're talking about what we've gone over today, in the ISY I've got the ability to add a new device, and I go to the old device, I right-click on it, and I say I want to replace it with, and it'll show me a list of compatible devices, and it will rewrite all the links to the same location but put the new device in that place. And other than if you need to change the name in the ELK, it'll call to the same location. So theoretically you shouldn't have to do even another import. Other than if you change the name of the device, it's not going to change the name in the ELK. You'd have to go in and do that manually.
Okay. When adding control lighting, I can then pick the individual or all. Does all work, or is there an old X10 thing?
Well, under the lighting, control lighting, you do have individual and you have all. All does kind of call back to the X10, and so it's based on house codes. Typically if you're going to be controlling, you want to actually control all the lights, you're going to do that through a scene. Steve, do you know if you use like an all on or all off on house code A, would that send individual commands? Would they respond to that, or?
Well, you could write a rule in the ISY that says if A1 on is seen, that I want to turn all my lights on. So you could have the ISY do the logic based on an X10 command it saw from the ELK, but the ISY automatically creates an all-on, all-off group. It is to group 0 in the ISY, and it gets put into a location which would be called My Lighting by default in the ELK, and it's probably in location 193 as the first scene that you did. But hitting all lights, unless you wrote a rule to say that when a particular X10 command is seen, I want all my lights to go on, wouldn't trigger the Insteon scene.
Yeah, so it sounds like that wouldn't be the way to go. There would be other better ways of achieving an all on or all off with the scenes as opposed to using that old house code reference.
Amy, how do you select a scene in RP?
Well, again, the scenes get mapped to particular lighting addresses. I'm just going to hop over to RP here, and you can see I've got some lights here. But if we were to scroll down through the list here, our scenes are going to start here at 193. Those are going to be considered on or off type scenes, and so we're mapping that over. So when you're setting up your groups or your scenes in the Insteon in the ISY, you're going to be starting at like number 1 and going through, and we can support up to 64 of those, but they're going to get mapped starting at the 193 location. And so then when you're in your rules, as I kind of showed in that first example, you can go to control lighting and you would choose individual here, but you are going to have to scroll down through until you get to your scene starting at 193. So it's a device number mapping configuration that gets you to your scenes.
One thing I'd like to add also is when you name things and you're not looking at them in the ISY where you might have some different graphics, when you name things, I might put just the word scene at the end of it also. So when I look at it, I know that it's a scene. Or I might put an S, or but sometimes it's common for somebody to have a scene that's called kitchen, but they might have a switch called kitchen, and so you don't want to confuse the two. So when you're doing naming schemes, try to name them so at a glance you go, oh, that's a scene, and that's an individual device.
That's a great point.
Hold on, my computer cut off. Amy, can you change variables in the ISY based on ELK rules?
The variables, I'm not quite sure I understand that. Maybe Steve has a better handle on what they mean by variables in the ISY.
So variables are things like if something happened, I want to change a 0 to a 1, so now I know I'm in a state of active. And when I'm in that state, then if something happens in ELK, I want something to work. So the what we've shown here basically says this. I've got all of my devices my ELK now can control as individual devices and individual scenes. And if ELK tells it to do something, those things are going to go on. What you'd have to create is another layer which says, okay, if ELK turns on my kitchen lights, I want to write a rule that says when kitchen lights go on and a variable condition has been met, that I want to turn on then the rest of the kitchen lights. So in that case, you could, by statusing what's just happened with a device that the ISY sees. It's probably a clumsy way to do it, but that you could do that. There's the reverse of it, which allows you to see the alarm zones by purchasing a module that you can put in the ISY, and then you can see the zone status, and you could write the rule in the ISY. But it's possible. Just think about statusing things. A lot of times we'll create a device that we maybe just use to status. It's something you put in the basement, and it's just a module. Nothing's even plugged into it. But I use it as a flag to status something. Well, a variable or a condition like that could be the same thing, where a variable that is normally 0 now goes to 1. That condition's been met, and a light just got turned on by ELK, and the ISY says, okay, when this light gets turned on and that variable is whatever I want it to be, then do some other bigger scene. You definitely could do that. And by changing the variable in the ISY, you would change the outcome of it. But you wouldn't be able to limit completely the ELK from turning on anything. It's going to at least be able to turn on one device, and you'd have to trigger off that.
Another question I have is, do you need ISY to run Insteon devices on the M1?
Well, the first thing I can touch on, the first thing that we had talked about was the M1 XSP, and that is a serial interface that you can hook our PLM to, and the process is then you go in to link mode in the PLM, and you have to turn on, I forgot what it is, 256, I think you have to turn that scene on, which says M1XCP now, we're going to start watching these links. You go to your PowerLink modem, and you put it in link mode, and then you go link to a device. Well, there's your first link. It's not going to pop up on the screen or anything and show you, but you have one link, and you go back and forth. So now imagine you did a house with 100 devices. If you missed one somewhere, you might be off on the way you're naming them, maybe off by one somewhere. So it doesn't give you an real exposure to that. You have to use software to look at the links in the PLM to then see, oh, okay, here's the ID, because you'll be able to see that through software, and then match up that ID with what the device actually is. So that's why we kind of jumped over using the M1XCP and went right to the ISY integration, because it offers that flexibility and some more horsepower.
Another thing to point out, kind of tying back to a previous question, if you had to replace a device and you were doing it this way, not going to be so easy.
Yeah, you'd never get it back in the same spot. It would be in the next linking location, and then you got to go and rename it and rechange your scenes to whatever the new location is. It would become a little more cumbersome.
Amy, this question is for you. It's about rule writing. Can a rule be written which triggers a shade down if the outside temperature is less than the inside room temperature? The goal of this is for a winter day when I want to keep the room warm from going out the window glass.
Okay, so it is possible to do these types of temperature comparisons, and as far as the shade control, I'm going to make an assumption here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but that's done through like an on-off type command with an appliance or other type of device. Would that be correct?
Correct. You can do it more analog just through a contact closure, or if you have a Somfy motor, we have an interface for that.
Okay, so to kind of step through this example, and I'm just going to go ahead and disconnect so that we don't have to wait for any more screens of things to be sent. But basically what you're going to do, if you have an outside temperature sensor, let me make sure I have a zone set up for that. I have one that will work. It's not named correctly, but it'll work. Let me just go in and name this temperature so that it's not as confusing. So we're going to assume that this zone 15 is our outside temperature, and we're going to also assume that we're looking at a keypad like a KP or a KPB that is giving us our inside temperature. That could also be a thermostat or another temperature sensor. But you can make a direct comparison. Typically, it's not going to be the same temperature inside and outside, so I would recommend that you have some kind of range there. You want it to be so many degrees hotter or cooler, and you're going to use a counter for that. So what you want to do is use the counter. You're going to set the counter to a particular value, which is going to actually be the temperature of the inside. So bear with me just a second. So we're going to start a rule that says whenever, and we're going to pick how frequently we want to do that. We're going to say whenever, and we're going to say every 20 minutes. Then we want to set our temperature counter to the temperature of our main keypad. We're going to set it to the inside temperature. And you want to say, okay, maybe it's 10, 20 degrees. We'll just use 20 as an example. 20 degrees hotter outside than it is inside. So that's where we're going to have to go then. And actually what I would want to do here is go ahead and just turn on a phantom output. This is going to let me make things happen in the order that I want them to. I'm just going to pick output 150. And again, this is an output that doesn't physically exist. I'm just going to turn it on for 2 seconds, and I'm doing this so that I can make things happen in the exact order that I want them to. So now I'm going to trigger my second rule to say whenever my output 150 turns off. Then I want to add to my counter. Now, you could add or subtract to the counter at this point, depending on whether or not you're looking for it to be hotter outside than it is inside or colder outside than it is inside. If you subtract, then you're going to have a cooler temperature. Basically, what we're doing here, we've set our counter to the temperature. Now we're going to add or subtract to it to get the value that we want to compare the other temperature to. So let's just, in this case, let's actually subtract 20 from that. We want to say when it's 20 degrees colder outside than it is inside. Oh, I picked the wrong counter there. Let me pick my temperature counter. Okay, so with those two rules now I basically have a value in my counter that is 20 degrees colder than it currently is inside. So now we can actually, at a certain interval, and this time I'm just going to pick every 25 minutes. We want to go to and we want to go to temperature. Now we're going to look at our temperature zone 15, and we want to say whenever it is less than our counter value. Then we would want to go here to control, a light, and this is where we would pick the appropriate address for our shade. I'm just going to pick this one here because it's convenient, and we could turn that on to, open the shade or turn it off to close it, that kind of thing. I know that's kind of a quick example there to try to take you through that, and I don't know if it fits the exact scenario the customer was describing, but that's the basic idea that you would go through using counters to do those temperature comparisons.
That's great, Amy. Thank you. Another question that I have is, how is a scene indicated on an ELK Navigator keypad?
Well, again, that's basically going to be by the address. So, it starts at 193 and goes up through 256. Those devices also give you that show option so that you can choose to show the lights that you want. You can choose to show the scenes that you want as well, but you are going to find those up in those higher numbers. So that's why it's really important when you're going through this process that you choose to show what you're actually going to use on that type of user interface so that you're not having to scroll through things that you aren't going to use to get to those scenes. You could alternately trigger scenes through tasks, through F keys. There's a number of different things. If there's a scene that you use a lot, you might want to assign that to an F key to get to it really quick, and then you're going to be able to see that on your navigator or other keypad. And you can also use those in lighting or scenes in your tasks that may also be doing other things like setting thermostats or controlling your audio system, that kind of thing.
Amy, at this time, I do not have any more questions. If people do have more questions, you can still filter them in, and if we don't get to them, we'll of course add them to our follow-up email, and Amy will get back to you.
And thank you everyone for spending the time with us today. We also definitely want to thank you, Steve, for being with us and doing a great job of this presentation. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add in conclusion, but take it away if you'd like to.
Just to follow up and touch base again on the various ways to integrate. There's tablet software and software you can use on your phone that are that add a layer to talk to both the ISY and the ELK. So the MobiLink and the eKeypad are definitely things to look at. Something cool with MobiLink is they have geofencing now. So you can actually set up a location around your house and say, whenever I get a certain distance from that, I want something to happen. I want make sure my lights are off or whatever. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there. The ISY, like I said, does support the reverse of it. So if you're saying, well, I want to see the zone statuses in my lighting controller as well, there's no reason that you can't do it that way. There's a module that you can load in your ISY and putting the same information in that we talked about, what your M1XCP and port address is. It will start pulling that information in the other way, and now you see zone statuses and everything to write the rules in your ISY. It's still synergy between the two systems, just a different way of looking at it. Today we wanted to show you what's been the most popular and has been the longest going relationship between those two. But if there's interest, we could surely show the other way also at a later date.
Thank you for that. On the screen now you should see our contact information at the top under our logos. Going to be our websites and also a telephone number to get in touch with us if you do have specific questions. Maybe later on you're like, oh, I really wanted to know about that and I didn't think about it. Also, please be sure to connect with us online. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and we also have YouTube channels, both companies that have a lot of great information for you. I also happened to notice earlier this week that Universal Devices, which is the company behind the ISY, they have some great videos online and some good training resources as well. So definitely use those resources and also connect with us so that we can keep you up to date on everything that we're doing. I want to thank you very much for spending your time with us. Before we sign off, I just want to check back with Jesse and see if any last-minute questions have come in.
Amy, we'll just get back with them in a follow-up email.
Yes. Okay, so you will get a follow-up email from us. That's going to come to you early next week. That'll be Monday, Tuesday or so of next week. In that follow-up email, you're going to get a copy of the presentation that we used today, a link to the recording of this, as well as some other resources that we feel you'll find helpful. So please keep your eyes open for that in your inbox. And again, want to thank you for being with us and hope everyone has a fabulous Friday afternoon and a great weekend. And thank you again, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Amy.